Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. The other day we did the League One, we've done League Two, and now it's time for the Championship. Come on, that's what we want to see. It's going to be a longer video than the rest, I think, but we're going to get into it right now. Starting with that Wolves and Blackburn game that is tomorrow night. Wolves win that game 3-0 to open up their banking account. Bolton with a 1-0 draw against Preston, and Bristol getting beat at home by Millwall, while Charlton draw with Derby. Middlesbrough a 3-1 win over Lincoln. Norwich beating West Brom. We're going to see Portsmouth upset at home by QPR. Stoke upset at home by Swansea. Sheffield United in a 1-1 draw with Birmingham. Watford and Southampton drawing 2-2, starting off Southampton's and then Burnley beating West Ham that Thursday. West Ham touted to be the favourites of the league this season, and then Cardiff and Wrexham drawing 2-2. So after the first game week is a pretty exciting game week. No one's really cementing the mark on who's going to be pushing for it, with Millwall with a win there, Lincoln with a 1-0 win over Portsmouth, whilst Middlesbrough win against Blackburn. Derby then beating Cardiff. We're going to see Southampton in a 3-1 win over Stoke. Preston in a 2-2 draw with Wolves. QPR winning 2-0 against Bolton. Swansea in a 1-1 draw with Sheffield United, while West Ham do make sure they win that game against Charlton. Wrexham beating Watford, and West Brom and Burnley drawing 1-1. Tough start there. Tough start. Wrexham then beat Birmingham. Derby in a 1-0 win over Swansea. We're going to see Middlesbrough beating West Brom. Wolves beating Stoke. Blackburn getting a win over QPR. We'll see Bolton with a 2-2 draw to Lincoln. Bristol in a 2-1 win over Portsmouth. Cardiff in a 1-1 draw with Sheffield United. Charlton with a loss to Preston. Southampton beating Millwall this early on, and Watford getting a draw out of West Ham. Norwich then beat Burnley. What on earth is going on there? We're going to have to go into game week 5. We're going to see what the tables are looking like in game week 5, as Birmingham get a point off Southampton. Lincoln with a 1-0 win over Blackburn. Portsmouth beating Derby. We're going to see Preston beating Bristol City in there. Sheffield United beating Bolton. Swansea beating Watford. West Ham beating Wolves. Stoke in a 2-1 win over Norwich as well there. Millwall getting a 1-0 draw with Wrexham. QPR in a 0-0 draw with Cardiff. We're going to see West Brom in a 3-1 win over Charlton, and then Burnley and Middlesbrough in a 1-0 win for Burnley there. Said it's going to be interesting to see who's where. Lincoln getting a 1-0 draw at Southampton. Preston a 3-2 win over Blackburn. Stoke getting a 2-0 over Charlton. We see Burnley in a 2-0 win over Bristol. Millwall putting 5 past this Bolton team. We're going to see then Portsmouth getting a loss to Cardiff. QPR in a 0-0 draw with Middlesbrough. We're going to see Sheffield United beating Norwich 4-2. West Brom in a 3-1 win over Watford. West Ham beating Derby 2-0. Swansea and Wrexham drawing, while Birmingham draw with Wolves. 5 games in, and no one's perfect right now. Preston are actually top of the table. Sheffield United, Southampton and Wrexham all remain unbeaten as well, and Watford, Bolton and Charlton all remain without a win after the first 5 games. Bristol are pretty low for where they are as well. First 5 games have been a very hectic 5 games. Preston top of the table. I do not imagine that will stick around and stay about. We'll see Blackburn then with a 2-1 win over Sheffield United. Bristol City with a 2-0 win over Lincoln. Cardiff beating Stoke. Middlesbrough and Millwall drawing 2-2. Southampton in a 2-0 win over Swansea. Watford getting a 2-1 win over Preston there. Perhaps Preston's first loss of the table. Bolton getting beat by West Ham. Wolves in a 1-0 win over Portsmouth. Derby beating West Brom 2-1. Norwich putting 3 past Birmingham. Wrexham beating Burnley. And then Charlton drawing with QPR. I'm drawing on the board for them there. West Ham with a 3-2 win over Wrexham. Bolton drawing with Cardiff. We'll see Derby in a 2-1 win over Birmingham. QPR winning that game away from home against West Brom. Blackburn getting beat at home by Millwall. Charlton with a 2-0 win over Portsmouth. Middlesbrough putting 4 past Norwich. Southampton with a 3-0 win over Bristol. We'll see Watford getting a 1-0 draw with Stoke. Preston beating Lincoln. Preston still coming back to it. Swansea with a 1-0 draw with Burnley, and then Sheffield United getting beat by Wolves at home. Bristol then beating Watford. We're going to see Cardiff in a 5-0 win over Charlton, while Millwall put 5 past West Ham. That's going to be big for the West Ham fans, to be upsetting for them. Birmingham getting beat by Middlesbrough. Burnley in a 2-0 win over Derby. Lincoln getting a surprise 1-0 win over Swansea there. We're going to see Norwich beating Bolton. Portsmouth a 2-1 win over Blackburn. QPR getting a 0-0 draw with Preston, whilst Wrexham beat Southampton, and Wolves put 4 past West Brom. Blackburn then getting beat at home by Cardiff. Bolton with a 2-0 win over Stoke. Charlton getting a loss at home to Bristol City. Derby in a 1-1 draw with Wrexham. Middlesbrough then beating Wolves. Southampton beating Portsmouth. Watford drawing with Burnley. Preston getting beat by Millwall. Sheffield United putting 3 past Lincoln. Swansea getting beat at home by Norwich. West Brom beating Birmingham, and West Ham beating QPR. We get to game week 10, we'll calculate again in game week 10 and see where we are at with the table, as Birmingham get a win over Preston. Bristol with a 2-0 win over Blackburn. Cardiff beating Watford in another 2-0 game there as well. Burnley with a 4-0 win over Charlton. Millwall 3-1 over Swansea. Stoke drawing Middlesbrough. Wolves win that game at home. We're going to see Wrexham win the game. Lincoln getting a draw out of West Ham. Norwich getting beat by Southampton at home. Portsmouth getting beat by Sheffield United. And QPR drawing another 0-0 game with for QPR there. 10 games in. Now top of the table is Millwall back top of the table. Southampton, I mean, Preston have right dropped off the last 5 games there, haven't they? We're only now on 15 points. We've had 3 losses on the board. It's probably shaking them up a little bit. Charlton still bottom of the table. Bolton and Blackburn in the relegation zone with them. You're kind of a mix up there. Millwall, Southampton, Middlesbrough, West Ham, Wolves, Cardiff, Wrexham and Burnley sitting in the promotion places right now. I said Preston had that little fall off there. They had a really nice start to the season, and then it's just vanished. Birmingham with a 2-0 win over QPR. Bristol getting a 1-0 win over Sheffield United. Derby with a 2-1 win over Stoke. Burnley and Wolves in a 0-0 draw. We're going to see Middlesbrough putting 5 past Cardiff. Millwall putting 3 past Lincoln. We're going to see Southampton a 2-0 win over Bolton. Watford getting beat at home by Charlton. Norwich beating Portsmouth. Swansea getting beat by West Ham. West Brom beating Blackburn, and then Wrexham losing at home to Preston. Preston still trying to do well for themselves. Blackburn getting a draw out of Wrexham. Bolton getting a loss to Middlesbrough. Cardiff with a 2-0 win over Birmingham. We're going to see Charlton with a 1-0 win over Norwich. Lincoln getting a 1-0 win over Burnley is a big upsetting one there. Portsmouth getting beat by Millwall. Preston with a 2-1 win over West Brom. QPR with a 2-0 win over Swansea, while Sheffield United getting beat by Derby. Stoke getting a 2-1 win over Bristol. West Ham and Southampton drawing 2-2, while Wolves win 3-0 against Watford. Bolton then beating Bristol City, getting another win on the board for themselves. Burnley with a 4-1 win over Portsmouth. Middlesbrough with a 3-0 win over Charlton. Millwall getting a draw at home to Derby. Dropping points at home is not good. Southampton beating QPR 2-0. Lincoln with a 1-0 win over Birmingham. Another win for Lincoln is big. Norwich losing at home to Watford. Sheffield United beating Wrexham there. Stoke with a 3-2 win over Preston. Swansea with a 2-1 win over Blackburn. West Ham winning 4-0 against West Brom. And then Wolves winning against Cardiff. Birmingham then lose at home to Millwall. Blackburn then beat Stoke. Derby in a loss at home to Norwich. Watford in a win over Lincoln. We see Portsmouth losing to Swansea at home. Preston beating Sheffield United. QPR with a 1-0 win over Burnley. Burnley letting things slip up a little bit too much there. West Brom and Southampton draw. Bristol City losing to Wolves. Cardiff losing to West Ham. Charlton in a 2-0 win over Bolton, and then Wrexham upsetting Middlesbrough. Game week 15 we're going to calculate again. Game week 15 we're going to calculate again. Blackburn in a 2-1 loss to West Ham. Bristol with a 1-0 win over Norwich. We're going to see Cardiff with a 2-1 win over Burnley. Charlton getting a 1-0 draw out of Sheffield United. Derby getting a 2-1 win over Bolton. Watford drawing with Middlesbrough 2-2. Portsmouth in a 4-2 win over Stoke. Preston drawing with Southampton. QPR in a 2-0 win over Lincoln. West Brom losing at home to Millwall, and Wrexham beating Wolves. 15 games in now. On top of the table is Millwall. West Ham are in second. Millwall only have 1 loss on the board. after 15 games from 36 points. West Ham on 33 points. Southampton, Middlesbrough, Wolves, Wrexham, Cardiff and Preston making up the rest of the playoff spots. Derby are close by, QPR are close by, Burnley close by. I mean, there's a lot of close byness there. Bolton, Portsmouth and Blackburn, all in the relegation zone right now. Birmingham pretty close down. West Brom, Watford, Charlton, Swansea, Stoke, Lincoln. That's probably the bottom half that you're going to be expecting to see in the fight this season, as Bolton get a 2-1 win over Portsmouth. Burnley in a 5-0 win over Blackburn, absolutely battering them. Middlesbrough in a 3-1 win over Bristol there. Millwall's getting a 1-0 win over QPR, that's all they need to do. Southampton beating Derby. Lincoln getting a 1-0 draw out of Wrexham. Norwich getting a 2-2 draw with Cardiff. Sheffield United getting beat at home by Watford. Stoke with a 2-0 win over Birmingham. Swansea in a 2-2 draw with West Brom. West Ham with a 4-1 win over Preston. And Wolves winning 3-0 against Chelsea. We're going to get to game week 23 now. We're going to move, oh my god, move all the way to game week 23. As Bristol get a draw with Wrexham. Cardiff beating Preston. Charlton losing to Lincoln. Middlesbrough beating Swansea. Norwich in a close one against QPR. Portsmouth getting beat by West Ham. Sheffield United beating Southampton. Wolves beating Derby. Bolton with a 3-0 win over West Brom is a surprising one. Burnley winning against Birmingham. Watford beating Blackburn and Stoke getting beat by Millwall. Birmingham getting a 1-1 draw against Bolton. Blackburn with a 2-1 win over Charlton trying to escape themselves. Derby beating Watford. We're going to see Millwall put 4 past Burnley. Southampton in a 3-0 draw with Middlesbrough. Lincoln in a loss to Wolves. Preston then beating Norwich. We're going to see QPR beating Sheffield United. Swansea losing at home to Cardiff is a big one. West Brom getting beat by Bristol City. West Ham beating Stoke. And Wrexham beating Portsmouth. We're going to get to game 23. Game 23 to calculate again, guys. Bolton with a 1-0 win over Blackburn. Bristol City in a 2-1 win over Southampton. Cardiff and Lincoln drawing. Charlton and Birmingham with Charlton with a 2-1 win over Birmingham there. Burnley beating Preston 3-2. Middlesbrough beating Derby 3-0. Watford losing at home to Millwall. Norwich in a 2-2 draw with Wrexham. Portsmouth in a 2-0 win over West Brom. Sheffield United beating West Ham. We're going to see Stoke in a 1-0 draw with QPR, and then Wolves beating Southampton 2-0. Putting them into the dirt a little bit there. Birmingham in a loss at home to Watford. Blackburn in a win over Norwich. Millwall beating Sheffield United 2-0. QPR holding Wolves down to a 0-0. Swansea then getting a 1-0 draw with Bolton. West Brom beating Cardiff. We're going to see West Ham and Middlesbrough in a really exciting game there. 3-0 win for Wrexham against Charlton. Derby and Bristol in a 1-1 draw. Southampton beating Burnley. Lincoln getting beat at home by Stoke. And Preston getting a 2-0 win over Portsmouth. So game week 23. Game week 23 is going to calculate again. I'm going to see where we're at. Blackburn in a 2-1 win over Derby. Bolton getting beat by Wrexham. Cardiff with a win over Southampton. Charlton beating Swansea. Lincoln and Norwich in a 1-1 draw. Portsmouth beating Birmingham. Preston in a loss to Middlesbrough. QPR beating Watford. Sheffield United and Burnley in a 1-1 draw. Stoke getting beat by West Brom at home. West Ham beating Bristol, and Wolves putting 3 past Millwall, putting them in the place a little bit. Birmingham getting beat by West Ham. Bristol in a 2-0 win over Cardiff. We're going to see Derby and Lincoln drawing 1-1. Burnley in a 3-0 win over Stoke. Middlesbrough then with a 2-0 win over Portsmouth. Millwall putting 5 past Charlton, while Southampton get upset at home by Blackburn. Watford then get upset at home by Bolton. Norwich get upset at home by Wolves. Swansea in a 2-0 win over Preston. West Brom beating Sheffield United, and then Wrexham beating QPR. We're going to get to game week 23. Game week 23, we're going to calculate where we're at in this game week. Bolton and Burnley drawing 1-1. Cardiff in a loss to Millwall. Charlton in a loss to Southampton. Lincoln beating West Brom. Portsmouth in a 2-0 win over Watford. Preston beating Derby. QPR losing at home to Bristol. Sheffield United losing at home to Middlesbrough. Stoke in a loss to Wrexham at home. West Ham beating Norwich, but only just beating Norwich in that 3-2 win. Halfway through the season now. Halfway through the season, we calculate now. And Millwall still top of the table. Millwall on 57 points after 23 games. 57 points. That is ridiculous. They're on for 114 points. They're on for the points record. There's actually 4 teams on for 100-point seasons right now. If they can keep that form up, West Ham, Wolves and Middlesbrough all in the fight. Wrexham, Southampton, Burnley and Cardiff are all in the promotion spots. Bristol close by, Preston are close by, QPR fell off a little bit. Derby are over there. Blackburn have made a bit more strides in their survival hopes. Birmingham with only 3 wins after 23 games is horrendous. They just keep on losing. Charlton, Portsmouth in the relegation zone. Swansea are really close by as well. Watford close by. Bolton have made their way outside of the relegation spots, who were at bottom for a while. Let's get into the second half of the season. Let's get into that second half of the season right now. As Birmingham turn things around straight away with 2-1 win over Cardiff, getting that 4th win on the board. Bristol in a loss to Stoke at home. Derby beating Sheffield United. Burnley in a 2-0 win over Lincoln. We're going to see Middlesbrough beating Bolton. Millwall in a 1-0 win over Portsmouth. Southampton beating West Ham. Watford drawing with Wolves. We're going to see Norwich beating Charlton, Swansea beating QPR, West Brom with a win over Preston, and then Wrexham beating Blackburn. Game week 31. Game week 31 is what we're going to calculate next. Birmingham, another 2-1 win there. Turning things around and pretty quickly for themselves. West Ham win their game. Derby beating Blackburn. Burnley with a 2-0 win over Sheffield United. Middlesbrough putting 5 past Preston. Preston, another team that is trying to chase playoffs with them. Wolves beating Millwall at home. Southampton beating Cardiff. Watford and QPR 1-1 draw. Norwich beating Lincoln. Swansea in a win over Charlton. West Brom beating Stoke, and then Wrexham beating Bolton 1-0. Keeping it close. Blackburn losing to West Brom at home. Bolton losing to Southampton at home. Cardiff losing to Middlesbrough at home. Charlton losing to Watford at home. Lincoln getting a 1-0 win over Millwall, setting the table a bit. Portsmouth a 2-0 win over Norwich. You're going to see Preston and Wrexham in a 3-3 draw. QPR and Birmingham in a 1-1 draw. We're going to see Sheffield United beating Bristol City. Stoke beating Derby. West Ham putting 4 past Swansea, and Wolves and Burnley in a 1-1 draw. Whilst Birmingham then keep on winning ways. They've turned things around in the second half of the season here. Blackburn with 2-0 win over Swansea. Bristol getting a 1-1 draw with Bolton. Cardiff getting a 2-2 draw with Wolves. Charlton losing to Middlesbrough. Derby getting a 1-1 draw with Millwall. Watford in a 1-0 win over Norwich. We're going to see Portsmouth beating Burnley. Preston losing at home to Stoke. QPR with a 2-0 win over Southampton. West Brom losing to West Ham, and then Wrexham beating Sheffield United. Imagine game fit 1, we'll see some changes. Bolton with a 2-1 win over Charlton. Burnley in a 2-0 win over QPR. Millwall with a 3-0 win over Birmingham. Southampton beating West Brom. Lincoln beating Watford. Norwich and Derby in a 4-4 draw, while Preston and Sheffield United in a 3-3 draw, and Stoke and Blackburn in a 2-2 draw, and Middlesbrough and Wrexham in a 1-1 draw, while Swansea and Portsmouth have a 0-0 draw. My God, we've counted down there. West Ham putting 5 past Cardiff though, and Wolves putting 3 past Bristol. Is where things stand on that one. Bolton with 2-1 win over Derby. You know, making strides for themselves. Burnley and Cardiff drawing. Middlesbrough putting 4 past Watford, making sure the goals go up. Millwall with a 3-0 win over West Brom. Preston and Southampton drawing 2-2. Lincoln beating QPR. Norwich beating Bristol. Sheffield United with 2-0 win over Charlton. Stoke losing at home to Portsmouth. Swansea a win over Birmingham. West Ham beating Blackburn, and Wolves and Wrexham drawing. Birmingham keep up the wins in the second half of the season. Blackburn will win over Burnley. Bristol getting a 1-1 draw at Middlesbrough. Cardiff drawing with Norwich. Charlton losing to Wolves. Derby beating Southampton. Watford beating Sheffield United. Portsmouth with a 2-0 win over Bolton there. Preston beating West Ham. QPR with a 2-0 win over Millwall. Swansea beating West Brom at home, and then Wrexham beating Lincoln. See what it's going to be like in Game Week 31 now. Game Week 31 as we go into it with Birmingham beating Derby, Bristol drawing with Southampton, Cardiff in a 2-0 win over Bolton, Burnley beating Swansea 3-0, Millwall with a 2-0 win over Blackburn, Lincoln losing to Preston at home, Norwich beating Middlesbrough, Portsmouth beating Charlton. We're going to see QPR in a 1-0 win over West Brom. Stoke beating Watford, Wolves beating Sheffield United, and then West Ham losing to Wrexham. Calculate the table now, and Millwall still top of the table on 70 points with 15 games to go. A bit more slipped up, you know, in the past few games. West Ham, Wolves, and Middlesbrough all still on for, you know, 100-point seasons easily. It's going to heat up a lot in the next few games. Wrexham are still in the promotion places. Southampton, Burnley, and Preston still up there. QPR, Cardiff doing well for themselves. Norwich are improving slowly. Bolton, Birmingham still not relegation zone. Birmingham still haven't escaped, but Bolton in there with them. Blackburn drops a bit further down. West Brom, Sheffield United, Swansea, Watford, Portsmouth, Lincoln, you know, all in the heaps of it. I mean, over the next 5 games, I imagine we'll see the changes continuously as Blackburn then beat Bristol. We'll see Charlton losing their derby with 2-0 over QPR. Watford beating Cardiff. Preston beating Birmingham. Sheffield United with a 2-0 win over Portsmouth. West Brom drawing with Wrexham. West Ham beating Lincoln there. Bolton in a 1-1 draw with Wolves. Middlesbrough putting 3 past Stoke. Southampton losing at home to Norwich, while Swansea get a win over Millwall. Millwall letting things slip a little there. Blackburn with 2-0 win over Portsmouth. Bolton with a 3-2 win over Norwich. Charlton beating Cardiff 2-0. Derby in a 1-1 draw with Burnley. Middlesbrough putting 4 past Birmingham. Southampton get in a win over Wrexham. Watford in a 1-1 draw with Bristol. Preston in a 2-0 win over QPR. Sheffield United in a 3-1 win over Stoke. Swansea losing at home to Lincoln. West Brom in a win over Wolves, as West Ham beat Millwall. Back-to-back losses from Millwall on the board now. Birmingham a win over West Brom. Bristol with 2-0 win over Charlton. Cardiff getting a draw with Blackburn. Burnley in a 2-0 win over Watford. Millwall a 3-2 win over Preston. Lincoln beating Sheffield United. Norwich putting 3 past Swansea. Portsmouth beating Southampton there. QPR and West Ham drawing. Stoke in a 2-0 win over Bolton. Wolves and Middlesbrough in a 4-3 game there, and then Wrexham beating Derby. That's going to heat things up. Game in 36. Game in 36 when we calculate again. Bolton with 2-1 win over QPR. Bristol with 2-2 draw with Birmingham. Cardiff in a 3-2 win over Derby. Charlton getting beat by West Ham. Burnley in a 2-0 win over West Brom. Middlesbrough beating Blackburn. Watford getting beat by Wrexham. Norwich beating Millwall. Millwall fall off a little bit here. Portsmouth 2-0 win over Lincoln. Sheffield United beating Swansea. Stoke drawing with Southampton, and Wolves drawing with Preston. Birmingham with 2-0 win over Sheffield United, trying to escape themselves there. Blackburn getting a draw out of Wolves. Derby in a 1-0 win over Charlton there. Millwall a 3-1 win over Bristol. Southampton winning against Watford. Lincoln get a draw out of Middlesbrough, while Preston get a win over Bolton. QPR losing at home to Portsmouth. Swansea losing at home to Stoke. West Brom losing at home to Norwich, whilst West Ham beat Burnley 3-0 and Wrexham beat Cardiff. 10 games to go after this, 10 games to go, and West Ham are now top of the table on 82 points. They're on for 112 points still. West Ham, what on earth is that about? Middlesbrough in second. Millwall sat in third. I mean, still now 5 teams can have 100-point seasons. Wrexham are in that conversation for themselves. Southampton, Burnley and Norwich in the promotion playoffs spots. Preston is still close by. Derby, Cardiff, Stoke, you know, can also make a push for themselves. Sheffield United have fell way off it, I'd say. Charlton, Swansea now in the relegation zone. Charlton, Swansea and West Brom make up the relegation zone with 10 games to go. We're going to calculate again on game week 41 as Bolton get a 2-0 win over Birmingham. Bristol with 3-0 win over West Brom, who are now in the relegation zone. Swansea winning in the Welsh derby there. Charlton with a 2-0 win over Blackburn. Millwall and Burnley drawing 1-1, while Middlesbrough and Southampton draw 1-1, and Watford beat Derby 2-0. Norwich beating Preston 3-2. Portsmouth in a 2-2 draw with Wrexham. Sheffield United beating QPR. Stoke getting beat at home by West Ham, and then Wolves beating Lincoln. Derby drawing with Middlesbrough. Southampton in a 2-0 win over Wolves. Lincoln in a 2-1 win over Cardiff. Preston getting a draw with Burnley. QPR in a 2-0 win over Stoke. Swansea a win over Bristol. West Brom beating Portsmouth Wrexham in a 2-0 win over Norwich. We're going to see Birmingham with a 2-1 win over Charlton. Blackburn beating Bolton 2-0. Millwall with a 4-1 win over Watford. And West Ham with a 3-2 win over Sheffield United. Birmingham with a 2-0 win over Blackburn as Birmingham continues to make the push away from that relegation zone. Derby and Preston going to draw 1-1 there. We're going to see Birmingham with a 1-0 win over Bolton. Middlesbrough with a 4-0 win over Sheffield United. You know, they're scoring the goals in there. Millwall beating Cardiff. We're going to see Southampton beating Charlton 2-0. Watford in a 3-2 win over Portsmouth. Norwich in a 2-1 win over West Ham. Swansea drawing with Wolves. We're going to see West Brom beating Lincoln. And Wrexham beating Stoke there 4-2. Blackburn then draw with Swansea. Bolton with a 3-0 win over Watford. Going to see what that's going to do for them. Cardiff and Bristol drawing 1-1. Charlton getting beat by Millwall. Lincoln with a 2-0 win over Derby. Portsmouth getting beat by Middlesbrough. Preston beating Swansea. We're going to see QPR with a 1-1 draw with Wrexham. Sheffield United beating West Brom. Stoke beating Burnley. West Ham beating Birmingham. And Norwich beating Wolves at home there. Burnley with a 1-1 draw with Wrexham. Millwall in a 2-2 draw with Middlesbrough. Lincoln in a 2-0 win over Bristol City. Lincoln done really well for themselves in this season. They've surprised a few, I'd say. Portsmouth with a 1-1 draw against Wolves. QPR beating Charlton. Stoke with a win over Cardiff. They're trying to make sure they survive themselves. Swansea in a 2-0 win over Southampton. We're going to see West Ham with a 3-1 win over Bolton. Birmingham and Norwich in a 2-1 win for Birmingham. We're going to see Preston with a 3-1 win over them there. Blackburn beating Sheffield United, who are down there in the humps. Game week 41 now. We're going to calculate as West Ham at top of the table on 94 points. Middlesbrough break on the 100 goal bit there. Millwall in second place. Middlesbrough up there. Wrexham up there. Wolves have probably dropped off. Southampton, Burnley, Norwich in the playoff spots. Preston are close by. Lincoln are actually fairly close by. Relegation zone is Bolton, Watford and Charlton. It's still going to be a lot to change in the next few games. I imagine 5 games to go, and we'll see where we are at as Blackburn get a 3-2 win over Preston. Bolton getting beat by Millwall. Bristol City with a 2-0 win over Burnley. Cardiff getting beat by Portsmouth. Charlton beating Stoke. We're going to see Derby losing to West Ham. Middlesbrough putting 3 past QPR. Southampton with a 2-0 win over Lincoln. We're going to see Watford with a 4-1 win over West Brom. Norwich beating Sheffield United. Wolves beating Birmingham. And Wrexham beating Swansea. Birmingham then a win over Wrexham. It's going to help them out a lot. Burnley with a 2-0 win over Norwich there. Millwall with a 1-0 draw with Southampton. Lincoln with a 1-0 win over Bolton. Portsmouth beating Bristol City 2-1, whilst Preston draw 2-0 with Charlton. QPR in a 2-0 win over Blackburn. Sheffield United and Cardiff drawing 1-1. Stoke drawing with Wolves. Swansea beating Derby. West Brom getting beat by Middlesbrough. And West Ham beating Watford 3-0. Absolutely smash through it here. Bolton with a 2-1 win over Sheffield United. Charlton with a 3-0 win over West Brom. Derby losing at home to Portsmouth there. Middlesbrough beating Burnley as they try and survive themselves. Southampton beating Birmingham. Norwich beating Stoke. Wolves with a win over West Brom so late in the season. Wrexham beating Millwall so late in the season as well. Blackburn and Lincoln drawing 1-1. Preston getting beat by Bristol City there. Cardiff with a 2-0 win over QPR. And Watford beating Swansea 4-2 with 2 games left. 2 games left now. West Ham have made 100 points. Middlesbrough are so close to it. Millwall have fell off. Wrexham, Wolves, Southampton, Burnley and Norwich in the playoffs there. Preston, Lincoln, Bristol City, Portsmouth in there. Bolton, West Brom and Charlton in the relegation zone with 2 games to go. All the way up to QPR could still get relegated. That is insane. Bolton with a 2-0 win over Swansea. That's going to change the table up a little bit there. Bristol drawing with Derby. Cardiff with a loss to West Brom at home. Charlton getting beat by Wrexham. Burnley in a 2-0 win over Southampton. Middlesbrough beating West Ham. To mean, last day of the season, we don't know who's going to win the league. It secures Middlesbrough's place in the playoffs there. Automatics. Preston with a 3-0 win puts them for a 3-0 win over Preston. Sheffield United drawing Millwall, Stoke beating Lincoln, and Wolves beating QPR. One game to go, and as you can see there, this is all boxed off. Birmingham in relegation zone, West Brom in relegation zone, Charlton have been relegated. Someone's going to get relegated with over 50 points potentially here, as Swansea, Bolton, Sheffield United, Blackburn, Derby, Cardiff all go in the last day. They could get relegated. They could all get relegated on the last day here, as Birmingham win their game against Bolton to ensure that they stay up. Blackburn there winning against Watford. We're going to see Derby getting beat by Wolves, Millwall in a 2-0 win over Stoke, Southampton beating Sheffield United, Lincoln with a 2-0 win over Charlton, Preston then getting a win over Cardiff, QPR making sure they win against Norwich there 2-0, Swansea getting beat by Middlesbrough, West Brom win their game against Bolton, West Ham beating Portsmouth, and Wrexham beating Bristol City. Last game of the season here, West Ham win the league on 103 points, Middlesbrough go up with them on 101 points. Millwall, Wrexham, Wolves, Southampton, Burnley and Norwich in the playoffs. Relegation is Bolton, Swansea and Charlton. On the last day of the season, Swansea do go down on 50 points. Jesus Christ, what has happened there? Zamvi Potnik goes down with them. And it's so close in that relegation battle. There is 6 points between 13th and 23rd. That 10-point there is insane. Norwich will then play against Wolves, and Burnley play against Southampton.